In this session, I'm going to go into more detail into a specific signature style of mine, which is the use of shadows in basically all of my shots of the last 2 years, especially in my architectural shots. So why do I do that? The specific use of enhanced shadows in specific areas in my image in my architectural photographs. Basically, it's derived from a concept that Louis Kahn uses in all his architectural creations. Louis Kahn is a famous architect who created some of the most iconic, at least a few iconic buildings that I really like a lot. And his idea was that shadows create volumes, create shapes, create mystery, create awe. That's also one of the reasons that, especially when you go to a church or to a cloister, for example, you always see those darkened spaces over there, meant for the monk or the priest or whatever to retreat and to do his things, whatever that is. So for some reason, shadows always create mystery, creates awe, creates at the same time also silence. And that's something that I also want to achieve in my architectural photographs. And at the same time, if you do that, creating awe, creating mystery, creating silence, you also get rid of all the visual noise that you would see in most architectural photographs, especially if you take photographs of skylines, like the one that I'm working on here. If you would look at this picture, for example, then you see the skyline there, of course, and you see this specific horizon. And the thing is, all the action is happening over here on ground level, of course. You see all the traffic there. You see lots of things happening, and it makes it a very busy picture. So I just want to get rid of this busyness. I just want to make it more silent, a more calm-looking image, even though it's New York City, which is, of course, a very crowded city. But nevertheless, it's a challenge for me to make it a more minimalistic-looking image. And it's very simple to do that just by adding all the shadows over here at this specific area over there at the horizon. And it also makes sense because the first thing that you would notice if you would walk over there in the streets of New York City is that at noon, for example, it can already be quite dark at ground level, and it's because of all the high-rise that you see over there. So basically, people are always walking in shadows over there. And if you would look up in the sky and you would look at the tops of the buildings, then you would see that all those buildings are always completely lit because of the sun, of course. And so that's something that struck me the first time that I went to New York. So I wanted to convey that specific idea, that specific notion as well, by use of shadows. So it makes sense in a lot of ways to add shadows at this specific area in the image. And at the same time, if you would look at it from, let's say, from a compositional point of view, from, let's say, creating presence point of view, then adding shadows in this specific area would also make sense, because then you also would have a sense of depth, not only from the buildings individually, but also more globally, more generally speaking. From if you would look at this image, then for example, the depth. The sense of depth goes from here to there as well. It goes from dark to light. So there are several reasons that I would want to add shadows in my architecture photographs. So how do I do that? Well, actually it's quite simple. So I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to add 4 layers again. I'm going to click on my working active layer. I'm going to add a mask in there. Well, of course, then I'm going to play with the curves tool by standing on my background layer. Go to Adjustments, Curves. I'm going to move it that way. So I'm going to just get rid of some of the highlights by moving the white point down quite considerably. Going to the mid-gray point, drag it down. And then, of course, always make sure that you don't see any very dark blacks over here in this area, because I only have to pay attention to this specific area over there. So I'm going to have a closer look at it. And just a quick check. if I don't see too dark blacks in there, because you still need to see all the details, even in the darkest areas in your image. And I think it looks quite good. So, okay, so I'm going to zoom out again. I can make it even a little bit darker. And to make sure, just pushing back the black point just a little bit, because I see some very dark areas over there. So I think this would be enough. I'm going to check again, especially in this area with the darker buildings already there. And I think it looks quite good. So I'm going to go for this version. Click OK. Go to my working layer. So I'm going to activate that. Make sure you're standing on the mask, of course. Well, I've already created the hard selection of the sky, so I want to exclude that, of course, because I only want to affect the skyline with the buildings in it and part of the water. So I'm going to load it from my original color file where I always save the selections. So I'm going to load the sky, but I'm going to invert it because the sky is it's my only hard selection. I won't be needing any luminosity mask for this because I just want to create a general sense of dark areas in this skyline image. So what I'm going to do now is to use the gradient tool again. I'm not going to use the linear gradient tool, I'm not going to use that, but I'm going to use the reflected gradient tool because I only want to affect this specific area over here. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to start, well, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Start over there and drop it around here. So if you would zoom out and see a comparison before and after, the sky hasn't been affected because I've excluded the sky. This after, this before. You can already see the difference and it looks quite natural because it's a little bit darker over there and the skyline is also, well, it's not dark enough, so, but I can still change that. So I have to do another iteration. Just as many times as I prefer to do, and just to achieve the desired result. But you can already see the effect it has by on the skyline image whenever you try to add shadows in specific areas in your image, like in this one. I'm going to go to the mask mode just to see what I've exactly done. So I've been using the reflected gradient tool, so you see that the part that is dark, that's the part that has only been affected. And also part of the water, and since it's a very smooth gradient from the horizon part to the water part, so this transition from this darkened area to this darkened area, and the area that hasn't been affected in the water and in the skyline itself is looking very, very smooth and subtle and very naturally. So this is the reason that I really like to use the reflected gradient tool to achieve specific effects in specific areas in my image. So I'm going to zoom out again, going back to normal image mode. I'm going to deselect it and see once again before and after. So you already see that it's already getting a lot more mood because of the use of shadows. And then if you want to see what happens if I just darken it a little bit more by going to the background layer and to adjustment and curves to even enhance that effect. I can just do something like this. Make sure you're not exaggerating too much. For example, this. Then you can already see what kind of effect it has if you add those shadows in those specific and targeted areas in your image. And you get rid of some visual noise. Make it more minimalistic looking, and at the same time it has a specific mood and feel to it. I'm trying to create this sense of mystery, and I think if you would do this once again, then you can that specific effect in this image, and it looks so much better right now, I think. So this is about adding shadows because of my specific signature style, and well, this specific signature styles of course derive from the thoughts, the ideas from one of my favorite architects, Louis Kahn. Of course, you should be free to do whatever you want to do in your image to achieve a specific signature style, but just make sure that it has a very logical reason. It should make sense. It should Preferably, it should be derived from let's say, a more higher level notion, a higher level concept. In this case, I think it makes sense because it adds depth, so it has a visual impact. But at the same time, it's derived from an idea that I really believe in. So just make sure whatever you want to do to achieve a signature style to have some reasoning behind it, because I think that's very important. So don't apply tricks for the sake of tricks, but just make sure that it has some rational reason, some logical reason.